Sign of the Beaver, Chapter 6. So if you remember from last chapter, from Chapter 5, Matt experienced horrible bee stings trying to go after some honey, and 2 Native Americans saved his life, pulled him out from the water and brought him back to the cabin to his own bed, and eventually was feeding him some medicine. So let's see what has happened. Finally, Matt woke up and knew that he was well. His body was no longer on fire. He could open his eyes, and he saw that sunlight glinted through the chinks in the roof. All his familiar things were around him: the shelves with the pewter dishes, his jacket hanging on a peg. He felt as though he had been on a long journey and had come home. He must have slept through half of a day and a night. When the cabin door opened and the Indian entered, Matt hastily pulled himself up. Now, with clear eyes, he saw that there was nothing in the least strange about this man. He was dressed not so differently from Matt's own father, in a coat of some rough brown cloth and leggings fringed down the side. His face was smooth shaven, and so was his whole head, except for one long black top knot. When he saw that Matt was awake, his stern face was lightened by a wide smile. "Good." It was half word, half grunt. "White boy very sick. Now well." Matt remembered his father's advice. "Good morning," he said respectfully. The Indian pointed a hand at his own chest. Saknis, family of Beaver," he said. He seemed to be waiting. "I'm Matthew Hollowell," Matt answered. "Good. White man leave you here?" "Just for a while," Matt told him. "He has gone to get my mother." It did not occur to him to lie to this old man, and he had to Ben. Moreover, he knew that there was something he had to say. He tried to find the right words. "I'm grateful to you," he said finally. "It was a very lucky thing you happened to find me." "We watch. White boy very foolish to climb bee tree." So, he had been right, Matt thought, that eyes were watching him from the forest. He was sure that the Indian had not asked him where he lived. They had brought him straight home to his cabin, even though he knew it was his good fortune they'd been watching him yesterday. He still felt somewhat resentful of their spying. Abruptly, he swung his feet to the floor and winced at the sharp pain that ran up his leg. The Indian noticed, and moving closer, he took Matt's ankle between his hand and pressed gently with his fingers. "It is broken?" Matt asked. "Nada, not broke. Mend soon. Sleep now. Not need medicine more." The Indian had put something on the table as he came in. When he had gone, Matt hobbled over to see what it was and found a wooden bowl of stew, thick and greasy, flavored with some strange plant, wonderfully filling and strengthening. With it there was a cake of cornbread, coarser than his own, but delicious. The next day the Indian brought the boy with him. And we are on page 28. I can see, I'm going to try to pronounce that. "Nookwinis, you call grandson," he announced. "Attean." The 2 boys stared at each other. The Indian boy's black eyes held no expression whatsoever. Unlike the old man, he was naked except for a breechcloth held up by a string at his waist. It passed between his legs and hung down like a little apron back to front. His heavy black hair fell straight to his shoulders. "Attean, same winter as white boy, maybe?" the man asked. He held up 10 fingers and then 4 more. "I'm 13, Matt answered, holding up his own fingers. At least, he excused himself, that would be true in another week. The Indian boy did not speak a word. Quite plainly, he had been brought here against his will. He stared about the cabin and seemed to despise everything he saw. He made Matt feel like a fool, sitting with his leg propped up on a stool. Matt steadied himself on his good leg and stood up. Now he noticed that Saknis was holding out to him a rough sort of crutch. Matt wished he had not have to try it right now, with both of them watching him, but he could see that the man expected it. He managed a few steps, furious at his own clumsiness. He had never imagined how pesky a crutch could be. Moreover, although there was not the slightest change in the boy's face, Matt was sure that Attean was laughing at him. There was a nasty little gleam in that boy's eyes. The moment they were gone, he seized the crutch in earnest, and very soon he could swing himself along at a good brisk pace. Now he was able to get about outside the cabin, to check the corn patch and bring in firewood. The trouble was he had only one boot. The woolen stocking his mother had knit for him was wearing thin. On the rough ground, it wore through in no time. Think, what happened? Do you guys remember what happened to his boot? In the previous chapter, when he was trying to get into the pond and the bog of the mud just kind of caught his foot and he had to pull his foot right out of his boot to get into the water. This, too, the Indian noticed. When he came with his grandson next morning, "No boot," he said, pointing. "I lost it," Matt answered. "It came off in the mud when I ran." Once again, he felt ridiculous under the Indian boy's black stare. 3 days later, Saknis brought him a new pair of moccasins. They were handsome and new, of moose hide, dark and glistening with grease, tied with a stout thongs that were long enough to wrap about his ankles. "Beaver woman make," Saknis said. "Better white man's boot. White boy see?" Matt took off his one boot and slipped on the moccasin. Indeed, they were better. In fact, they were wonderful, not stiff like new leather boots, not knotty or pinchy anywhere, light as nothing at all when he lifted his feet. No wonder Indians did not make a sound when they walked in the forest. Shame suddenly flooded over Matt. This man had perhaps saved his life, had come bringing food and a crutch, and now these beautiful moccasins. It wasn't enough to say an awkward thank you. He needed to give something in return. Not money. There were a few silver coins in his tin box, but something made him very sure that he could not offer money to this proud old man. He looked about him in despair. There was almost nothing of his own in the cabin. Then he spied the 2 books on the shelf, the only 2 his father had been able to carry into the wilderness. One was the Bible. He dared not give away his father's Bible. The other book was his own, the only one he had ever possessed, Robinson Crusoe. He had read it a dozen times, and the thought of parting with it was painful, but it was the only thing he had to give. He hobbled across the room and took down from the shelf and held it out to the Indian. Saknis stared at it. "It's for you," Matt said. "It's a gift. Please take it." Saknis reached out and took the book in his hand. He turned it over and over slowly, his face showing not a sign of pleasure. Then he opened it and stood peering at the page. With shame, Matt saw that he was holding it upside down. He couldn't read. Of course he couldn't. Matt should have known that. He had made a terrible mistake and embarrassed the good man. He had heard once that the one thing an Indian could never forgive was a hurt to his pride. He felt his own face burning. But Saknis did not look embarrassed. His dark stare went from the book to Matt's face. "White boy, no signs?" he asked. Matt was puzzled. "White boy read what white man write here?" "Yes," Matt admitted. "I can read it." For a long moment the Indian studied the book. Then astonishingly, the rare white smile flashed. "Good," he grunted. "Saknis make treaty." "A treaty?" Matt was even more puzzled. Nuwenis hunt. Bring white boy bird and rabbit. White boy teach Attean white man sign. "You mean I should teach him to read?" "Good. White boy teach Attean what books say." Doubtfully, Matt looked from the old man to the boy, who stood silently listening. His heart sank. The scorn in the boy's face had turned to black anger. "Nada." The furious word exploded, the first word Matt had ever heard him speak. Half under his breath, he muttered a string of incomprehensible words. His grandfather's stern face did not change. He was undisturbed by the boy's defiance. "Attend learn," he said. White man come more and more to Indian land. White man not make treaty with pipe. White man make signs on paper. Signs Indian not know. Indian put mark on paper to show him friend of white man. Then white man take land. Tell Indian cannot hunt on land. Attean learn to read white man's signs. Attean not give away hunting grounds. The boy glowered at his grandfather, but he did not dare to speak again. With a black scowl, he stalked out of the cabin. Good, said Saknis calmly. He handed the book back to Matt. Attean come Siba tomorrow. Wow. So we are on chapter 6. What a powerful chapter this is. So we are coming to, we talk about what some of our story conflicts could be, right? At first, what was the conflict that Matt was facing in kind of the chapters 1 through 4? Right? Wasn't it man versus nature? Well, chapters like 1, 2, and 4 were kind of like man versus nature. It was Matt versus, him just getting along, him needing to hunt and him needing to cook and him needing to gather wood and chink the cabin. But when Matt met Ben, then the conflict was man versus man, right? Did Ben take something that Matt really needed? Okay. After Ben took the gun that Matt needed, and Matt was feeling really bad about it, right? What conflict was being shown in the book? It was man versus self. Matt was feeling very foolish that he let Ben take that gun. He was feeling very foolish that he didn't take it to bed with him that night, or to keep his eye on it, or stay awake that night. So now we have the Native Americans coming into the chapter. And we've heard what happened to the Native Americans right in this paragraph on page 31, our text evidence, right in this paragraph, right? It explains what happened to the Native Americans. The white men come, the white men make signs on paper. The Indian put mark on paper to show that they were friends. Then all of a sudden the white men take their land. So the white men were fooling the Indians. So what conflict do you think that is showing? Native Americans versus what? Native Americans versus man, right? The white men did not treat them fairly at all. Okay. So now, for Matt to show that he can read, and now the older Native American, the grandfather, right, is saying that Matt is going to teach Attean how to read, so that this won't happen to him again. Right? So if we're talking about, referring back to here, are there any connections you can make? Any connections to other books we've read, to other topics in social studies? Has there been another time in history where men tried to take over other land from people? Right? Can we make text to world connections with this? The white man took land from the Native Americans. Can we say, like in World War II, how Hitler wanted to take land from, the Jewish people? That could be a connection to make. Okay. We will come back for chapter 7 tomorrow.